He's also an economic advisor for the White House Initiative on Asian American and Pacific Islanders. As I told you, I recruited him inside the White House, and he's kind of my counterpart in the White House because he organized the annual Doing Business in Asia conference inside the White House. So anyway, he's probably not happy, but I'm just telling you that if you want to go to the White House, here's the channel. Thank you.
May, thank you so much for the invitation. I want to thank all the corporate partners here as well. Folks that actually made it to the last event at the White House, but I see a couple of familiar faces here. I want to thank Kennesaw State University for hosting this. I really did not know about this program until I met May last May. And I was thoroughly impressed by the work that you guys are doing here, not just because I'm sort of biased towards this agenda, same as you are, but that you guys are doing it well. And it fits perfectly with what the president is pushing just in terms of what you guys may have heard, the rebalancing effort towards the Asia-Pacific region. So during the beginning of the president's tenure at the White House, there was an analysis done on where the U.S. government is overweight and underweight. And most of us know where we are involved, whether it's in the Middle East or other regions of the world. And through the analysis, it was deemed that we were underweight in the Asia-Pacific region, both from an economic perspective, political, and military perspective as well. So in these verticals, different plans have been drawn out to engage U.S. corporations, intergovernment relationships, and the whole basically movement of the U.S. government infrastructure to the Asia-Pacific region and developing stronger ties. The president has made many quotes regarding the Asia-Pacific region as the future. We all know the statistics here on the economic growth that currently exists and what the future potential is. So I don't have to go through that. So what I wanted to do was first just give you maybe like a 15 to 20 second overview of me and my background, and give just a bit of an overview of what the rebalancing effort actually consists of from an economic perspective, not the military and strategic perspective, and then talk about OPIC, right? I mean, this symposium is about partnership opportunities, so I sort of constructed a PowerPoint presentation, mainly last night, on how to effectively partner with OPIC and the U.S. government when it comes to pushing forward highly developmental transactions in the region, and most importantly, reducing a lot of the inequities that still exist in the region, whether it's in the healthcare field, education, energy poverty, manufacturing, what have you. So my name is Saupo. I'm an economic policy advisor with the White House Initiative on Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders. I also serve at OPIC, which is the U.S. government's development finance institution, which was launched over 40 years ago. OPIC, if many of you not know, is responsible for financing infrastructure projects in over 150 plus emerging markets. And we do that through a number of verticals, if you will. One through direct loans, which the World Bank is famous for, and then also through private equity funds, which is what my main role is, and then also providing political risk insurance to protect investments against any type of political risk involving government and outside entities sort of infringing on investments in that region, if you will. So the White House Initiative on Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders was actually established by executive order by the president in 2009. And the goal of this office is to enhance the quality of life of Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders all over the country. And it's almost like a broad mandate to our team to really come up with unique strategies to move the USG infrastructure towards these communities to figure out how we can enhance their quality of lives. So I was asked to leave my role at OPIC to come over to this office to really, from the ground up, build up an economic growth strategy for the Asian American Pacific Islander communities. During my first tour, I traveled around the country and I gave talks very similar to this to a whole range of communities, whether it's the Sikhs or the Koreans or the Chinese, and I listened to what economic issues they were facing on the ground. And they were very, very unique, and at the same time, I was very, very humble. So we took that advice and guidance, brought it back to the White House, and created strategies around them to push forward certain policy recommendations or come up with very unique approaches. This is my second tour with this office, and during this time period, what my focus is basically supporting the President's rebalancing effort to the Asia-Pacific region from the economic front. So, from a sort of 30,000-foot perspective, how can we deepen trade and investment ties between the U.S. and the region, and figure out unique ways from a policy perspective that the right types of policies are adopted that actually support companies like those that are present today to export and invest across the region with the least amount of difficulty and the most amount of harmony. Because at the same time, when that's happening, we're building up diplomatic ties, we're building up bilateral ties with a lot of these countries. So that's a major focus of mine right now. In terms of how we're doing it, we took a stab at it last year, where Kennesaw State delegation was present, where we launched the first White House Doing Business in Asia forum. So at that forum, which was a day-long forum, we brought in senior White House officials, senior federal officials, mainly from the economic agencies and the State Department, to come in and really speak to about 80 executives from the Asian American Pacific Islander business community across the country. And at that time, we had a number of breakout sessions where policy recommendations were delivered to these administration officials, and we put together a plan of action to sort of move on that. At that time period, I went back to OPIC and sort of handed the keys to the next guy and said, hey, good luck. They had, at that time, not really built out this infrastructure on the Asia-Pacific economic side, so they asked me to come back and sort of restart it, so that's what I'm doing now. So the way we're going to sort of structure this is basically on May 29th, we're going to restart this Doing Business in Asia series at the White House. We're going to have a major opening symposium end of May, which is Asia-Pacific Islander Heritage Month. And we're gonna use the same model, but this time we're gonna go sector specific. So we'll have an opening symposium with about 80 to 100 executives. It's gonna be conversation style, and we're gonna get a lot of feedback and policy recommendations from a whole range of executives. And then we're gonna go sector specific. So we'll have a healthcare roundtable, an energy roundtable, a banking roundtable, a telecom roundtable, and then end off with a culminating event. And at this culminating event, my goal is to have, a report, hopefully 30 to 50 pages long, that outlines maybe 10 to 15 very solid policy recommendations that the President can move on and the White House can take seriously, so that we make it easier for all of you to do business across the Asia-Pacific region. I've met with a number of banking executives who have given me very specific regulatory or policy concerns that I hadn't even thought of when I was initially brainstorming about how we could stimulate lending to companies that are exporting or investing abroad. So I get excited about hearing these types of recommendations. I think what we can do if we organize well is really put something concrete together that's taken seriously at the highest level, so we can be part of the international economic agenda for the Obama administration. I sort of get my inspiration for this through, I guess, one major aspect. When I was finishing graduate school, I went for an internship appointment or interview at this same office, but in the Bush administration. I didn't end up getting it, but I learned a lot about the office. And that office during the Bush administration was focused specifically on economic development. And I went to the White House to hear President Bush speak once at the end of his tenure, basically. His tenure came to a close. And he held up a big report that included a whole range of policy recommendations that were pushed forward at the White House that came out of a lot of blood and sweat tears from this office and spending a lot of time on the ground with people like yourself. And my goal is to go, I think we can replicate that, and I think we can do it faster. I think we can have a bigger impact, and that's our goal. So one thing that I did was I asked one of the interns here to put White House postcards on your table so we can sort of get the conversation and dialogue going. You guys know your business better than I know your business, right? And you guys have very specific concerns, maybe 2 or 3, that probably bother you sort of day to day when it comes to doing business in Asia. And I want to hear about it. And I want you guys to jot it down. And I want to take that back. And I want that to become sort of part of this process. So that's one ask from me to you. Another thing that I want to do is just basically run through basically some of the initiatives that have come out of the Obama administration that a number of you can take advantage of if you're interested. One, basically to tackle energy poverty in the Asia-Pacific region, the president announced, it's going to be kind of a long name, it's the U.S. Asia-Pacific Comprehensive Partnership for Sustainable Energy Future. So it's a long name. It's tough for me to pronounce. I have to write it down. So the president came up with this in concert with the president of the Republic of Indonesia and His Majesty the Sultan of Brunei. And this partnership builds upon efforts underway in APAC and ASEAN to bring concrete, impactful progress and basically stimulating energy investment across the region. In terms of the hard numbers, to sort of move away from kind of the 30,000-foot perspective, the president's committed up to $6 billion in supporting energy investments across the region. Where I'm at, OPIC, we've committed up to $1 billion in project finance and support for investments in renewable energy. And then the Export-Import Bank, which is another sort of export credit agency, has committed up to $5 billion in export credit. So for those of you in the room that actually have technology and equipment that can be part of the energy infrastructure in these countries, there's financing there to help you do that, to get your goods from point A to point B, or if you need working capital to actually help develop and distribute them. Also, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, I'm sure that's sort of like a household phrase around Kennesaw State and amongst a lot of you, but it's a broad-based trade agreement that's focused on opening markets across the Asia-Pacific region. The goal is really, hopefully by the end of the administration and even earlier, this trade agreement gets passed and duties and tariffs for a whole range of goods are reduced and barriers are basically thrown away, if you will. I really recommend, primarily to the small and medium enterprises in the room, to get involved in the conversation, to think about what it is that's sort of hampering your small business in exporting to these markets and come up with certain ideas that I can take back so it can be part of the conversation. Because I really don't see enough of that. I see a lot of the household names and the major corporations that are part of the conversation because they're in the city and they're active and they know what's going on. But I think a lot of us are really sitting on the sidelines and not taking an active role in what could be one of the major trade agreements to date, if you will. And they encompass a lot of our home countries, which are experiencing faster growth than a lot of the developed economies right now. And we should be a part of that. So that's another one of my recommendations to you. And through this process that I'm leading, you'll have an opportunity to really recommend some good policy initiatives and ideas. So I think, does that give you guys a good overview of what we're doing at the White House and what we're doing at OPIC? One second. So what I want to do is get into the nuts and bolts of OPIC and just kind of take you guys through the process of what OPIC is and then also how to do business with us. And I'll take you guys through a couple case studies so you guys can see the types of projects that we've supported in the region that I've been actively involved in and how you guys can sort of replicate or even come up with something innovative. So, all right, let me get started here. So I'm partnering with OPIC in the Asia Pacific. So OPIC is the U.S. government's development finance institution. We mobilize U.S. private capital in the room to really solve critical development challenges across the world, and at the same time advance U.S. foreign policy. We manage an $18 billion portfolio of projects in 103 countries, and we operate on a self-sustaining basis. So we have to make money to exist, and we have to be commercially sound and also make an impact at the same time. So we have a number of mandates. So as mentioned, I mean, if you look at that sort of Venn diagram there, we're always struggling with solving critical development challenges, supporting U.S. foreign policy, and also supporting U.S. business. And think about the types of projects that we'd be interested in supporting. Think about the projects that you guys are currently working on. Would it sort of fit this nexus? And just for example, on the development side, if you're running a hospital right now, which I'll get to later, I mean, are you launching a healthcare initiative in some country that's going to reduce inequities and access to healthcare, right? If it's in a country that the U.S. really deems as a foreign policy priority, and you guys can think of a lot of those countries right now, I mean, that's another plus. And then are you really supporting U.S. business, right? Is it a strong U.S. business that's coming into one of these emerging markets and really, bringing that sort of Western approach, if you will, or some of those Western products and services into a market that doesn't currently have them? Sorry, let's screw this up. Yeah, so the three different verticals that I talked about earlier in terms of what we provide is basically financing support for private equity funds. I don't know if anybody here is in the private equity space or industry, but I'm generally meeting with those guys to figure out if we want to invest in their funds. So their funds are the ones that actually invest in a whole range of projects. So if it's an African healthcare fund, and it's a team of people that are investing in healthcare projects in Africa. It's the same thing with renewable energy in Asia, if you will. Right? On the political risk insurance side, I talked about that. Basically, we're providing a whole range of political risk cover for projects in these countries. And then investment finance, I mean, for the bankers in the room, this is very similar to corporate loans, but primarily for the emerging markets. These are some of our clients and partners and strategic alliances. Maybe one day Saupo will be up there. We work closely with a lot of the development finance institutions, a lot of household names in DC. A lot of us have, very similar missions and objectives and solving development challenges in some of these very tough markets. So we work closely with them. Here's some of the eligibility criteria for investors. If you guys are interested, have a commercially viable business plan, a successful track record, involve the U.S. private sector, and then maintain private sector control. Again, a lot of this stuff is going to be sort of repetitive of what I'm saying, but we strongly adhere to environmental policies, labor policies, human rights policies, and make sure that every investment that we take on, we're not violating any type of human rights. So that's very important to us. And to show our importance, we have a floor full of people at OPIT whose sole responsibility is to go through every single project and make sure that it adheres to our standards. So this is OPIT by the numbers, the amount that we have supported, total projects financed, amount of exports that we've supported as well. Here's a little summary of some of the deals, just to give you guys a little overview of what type of projects we've supported. If I'm moving too fast, please let me know. Is this a good pace for you guys? Yeah? Okay. So here's some of our investment priorities. And I'm sure you've heard the president and his officials at a high level speak about some of these priorities, but renewable energy has been a big priority of this administration, and OPIC has really been on the front lines of supporting renewable energy investments all across the world and the Asia Pacific region, which I'll get to. On the impact investing side, I don't know if you guys have heard about sort of the term impact investing, but this is really social responsible investing at its finest. I mean, you think about what Mohammed Yunus has done. He's a household name with the Grameen Bank, right? And supporting those types of projects that are really focused on solving a lot of these inequities and doing it in a very unique manner. And those types of projects come to us with just this little hole that needs to be filled, which is a certain amount of capital to really sort of pour gasoline on the fire, if you will. And then strategic priority countries and regions. I mean, the Asia Pacific region is a strategic priority for us, strategic priority for the administration and the country. And we actually just opened an office in Bangkok to show our support there. We have a staff member going out there who's going to be working closely on this agenda. The Middle East, North Africa region, as you know, especially post-Arab Spring, MENA became a big priority for us. We've supported a number of projects in the region since. So this is the investment funds, as I've talked about. Anyone that is interested, in students as well, interested in going to the private equity career track in some of these countries, I mean, this is really how we operate. So, within a private equity fund structure, you have, a limited partner and a general partner, if you will, just to make it very simple. So you have the investor and then sort of the manager of the investments. We come in as a senior financing partner to that general partner to help them sort of stimulate investments in a lot of these markets. This is generally a structure that we support, just to make it very simple how the investment fund would work. So for example, if Saupo decided to bring some of its healthcare executives that are on the team together and say, we want to start a Asia Pacific healthcare fund, then you guys would lay out your strategy for what types of healthcare projects you would be investing in. And then you would go out and raise capital, right? Go out and go to all your rich friends at Saupo and say, hey, we're starting this fund. This is the investment strategy. This is our team. This is the way we plan on exiting our investments. This is our return profile. Now, please invest in us, right? And what we would do then, if we liked what you guys are doing, we would provide a senior financing facility to that fund to actually provide some matching leverage so you guys can go ahead and make those investments, right? Think about it in terms of developmental impact. If you're making one investment that takes, a year and a half, which is very complicated, and some of these markets can get very complicated when it comes to legal and structure and whatnot. I think it makes a lot more sense to go through a fund that's going to make 8 or 9 investments. Maybe 3 or 4 of them don't do as well, but the others do. But you've sort of diversified your risk and you're having an impact at the same time. So here's a little case study that's sort of in my portfolio. An Asian infrastructure fund that's managed by Olympus Capital Asia. So here, so this fund is a $300 million fund that we supported. The fund management team had decades of experience in the region and had a strong track record of investing and exiting these projects. They raised $150 million from outside investors to invest in projects all across the region, primarily in infrastructure-related assets. And then they came to OPIC and said, look, to make this work, OPIC needs to be part of this puzzle. And we have very similar goals. We're looking to finance infrastructure projects. They have a whole team of professionals that have done it for decades, and they needed our financing support to do so. And in the process, we get sort of security rights over those assets, and we get paid back once those assets are exited. So these are very unique ways in which to partner, to invest in the Asia Pacific region, and it's very, very possible. It's very possible, and you don't have to go it alone and just think like a visionary and sort of fly without any wings. I mean, we do have a support system here, whether it's the U.S. Department of Commerce, OPIC, EXIM, USTDA. We have a whole suite of resources there to help you do that because it's in our mutual interest. So here's an example of what this fund invested in. And a lot of these companies will sound like household names that you have around Atlanta. But DM Healthcare, for one, it's an Indian company that owns and operates hospitals in India. They have over 1,400 hospital beds in operation. And we came in with capital to help support the growth of DM Healthcare's growth plans to build out an additional 1,300 beds. Right? These are very real projects on the ground. It's not money shifting from one institution to another and really not having an impact. I mean, we're hitting projects on the ground. We supported, through this fund, a corporate and SME lender, just like a lot of banks that are present here today. They have a strong presence in South India and a number of areas that are traditionally underserved in the banking space in India. And their growth strategy was, how do we expand into housing, auto, and personal loans, and really expand our books so we can help people, those that are underbanked, become part of the mainstream. And then a leading infrastructure company that focused on developing, wastewater and water treatment projects across India. So a lot of these projects, as you can see, are very developmental. They're hitting people on the ground. They solve major needs. And what they need is basically a team of people that are running an investment fund that have the same objectives as us, and that we can come in and support with financing. Here's another project that I worked on. It's another impact investment in Asia. The Aga Khan University came to OPIC about 2 years ago and said, look, we have one of the best hospitals in Pakistan, in Karachi, and we've been here for X amount of years, 2 decades, probably over that, and we're undertaking a $100 million expansion. It's not just one project, it's 9 projects. A neonatal intensive care center, an ambulatory care center, a teaching center for nurses. I mean, they had a big vision. They were doing it well, and they had a strong team. What they needed was OPIC to come in with financing to help support that expansion, so they can go out to other investors and say, hey, OPIC's in here with us. They're here for the long run, and they support increasing access to healthcare in Pakistan. So 85 went up to 100. We came in for 30. Private donors came in. The French Development Bank came in as well. And as collateral, we didn't take collateral over the hospital or any of those entities, because we wouldn't want to do that. We took collateral on a 20-acre piece of land that was adjacent, right? So here we go. If you just take a look at the project output in terms of the developmental impact that we're having through these projects, it's immense. And to be quite frank, it's really what keeps me around here. I've seen this project on the ground when I had to go out there, and I was really humbled by what I saw, because you have people from all over Pakistan, families that come in just to use the services of this hospital, right? And the interesting thing about this project, which is an impact investment, is that they basically abide by some Robin Hood principle, which is those hospital patients that can afford private beds, they'll go ahead and do that. They'll get the same quality of care as somebody who's coming in who doesn't have any money. But somebody that comes in who doesn't have any money is just not going to get the private suite that basically is reserved for whoever's coming in and pay the most amount of money. And that money gets basically siphoned off to help support those that can't pay for it. And they still turn a small operating profit. Right? I'm not saying all projects need to be like that, but we're thinking on the cutting edge of how to make these projects work in these countries. And this is a prime example. So, here's all the projects that were supported. This project alone. And just to give you a little example, I don't want to get too technical and nerdy here, but this is a bit of the flow of funds, and it does get complicated at times. But just to basically show where the money from OPIC is coming from, how we plan on getting repaid, where are the donations coming from, and how complicated these transactions can get, just in terms of where the money's coming from, where it's being spent, and how we're getting repaid. I think another thing, to note is that, we see a project like this that's almost like a puzzle. We're going to work hard. We're going to work with our partners to help get it done. And I think this was the case here. So this is sort of the end of the OPIC side of the presentation. I know I ran through it a bit fast, but I hope that sort of made sense to give you guys a little overview of what we do at OPIC and what our role is at the White House Initiative to support the President's efforts across the Asia-Pacific region. And before I get off the stage, I brought a little proclamation from the President that we hand out during the month of May. We're a little early. right now. So I'm bringing the one from last year. So I'd like to invite the representatives from Kennesaw State to come up here to accept this and really frame it and put it on their wall to show our support for each other. So please.